Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into something a bit edgy today, something that might make a few people feel, well, a little uncomfortable. We're gonna tackle society's fear of free thinkers.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and to help us break it all down, we've got this awesome YouTube video essay. It's all about the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
Okay.
Have you ever felt like, all those rules that everyone seems to just blindly accept just don't make any sense?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you feel like you're the only one who's actually, questioning things.
I think we've all been there.
Well, Nietzsche was all about that kind of thinking. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We'll explore why this kind of thinking, this free thinking, can be so threatening to, well, the status quo, the way things are.
Right.
To those in power.
What's so fascinating to me is that this fear of free thinking, it's not new, not at all.
Oh, really?
It's something that humans have struggled with, for centuries.
Wow.
And Nietzsche, even though he lived, over 100 years ago? Yeah.
He offers some, I think, surprisingly relevant insights into why this fear exists.
Okay, so let's kick things off with, one of Nietzsche's most famous and often misunderstood ideas.
Okay.
The whole God is dead thing.
Right.
I'll admit it's always sounded, bit intense to me, a little dramatic, maybe.
Right. It can definitely sound provocative. But the really important thing here is to understand that Nietzsche wasn't actually, celebrating atheism.
Oh, interesting.
It wasn't about that at all. He was issuing a warning, really.
Mm-hmm.
He saw the decline of, traditional religious authority as this sign, a sign that society was losing its shared values, its moral compass. He was worried, that people were just clinging to empty rituals and traditions.
So just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Without really thinking about it.
Without really understanding the why behind it all.
So it's like believing something just because you're supposed to, not because you've actually thought it through.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. And this is precisely where free thinkers come in. They're the ones who, they see through that facade. They're the ones questioning the why behind all the rules and beliefs that everyone else just seems to accept without, a second thought.
And that can be pretty unsettling, can it?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially for those in power.
Absolutely, especially for them.
It's like if people start questioning the accepted truths, who knows what could happen?
Right. Who knows? It's unpredictable.
It really is.
And for those who want to, keep things the way they are.
Maintain control.
Exactly. Maintain control. It can be really scary.
Yeah, it's like that saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, right?
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Free thinkers are those nails, and society is the hammer.
That's a very powerful image. And it's something that, Nietzsche himself experienced firsthand. His ideas about morality, truth, even the nature of reality, they were met with, a lot of hostility. And it wasn't because they were, bad ideas. It was because they challenged the, comfortable assumptions that people were just so used to.
It seems like we're almost hardwired to fear anyone who, who doesn't fit in, who questions those rules.
Yeah.
It's like we're instinctively drawn to the safety of the herd, right?
Yeah.
And we're suspicious of the lone wolf who wanders off on their own.
You're touching on something I think really fundamental about human nature.
Mm-hmm.
We are, in a sense, hardwired for conformity.
We are.
It's a survival instinct. Think about our ancestors, right? Their survival, it depended on sticking together, following the leader, maintaining that group cohesion. Going against the grain, that was risky business.
So going against the herd could mean what? Getting left behind.
Yeah.
Facing danger alone.
Exactly. And that instinct, it's still with us today.
It is.
Even though the dangers, might look a little different. Neuroscience shows that when we encounter ideas that challenge our, those deeply held beliefs, our brains actually react as if we're facing a physical threat.
Wait, so you're telling me my brain, literally sees a new idea as a saber-toothed tiger?
Well, okay, maybe not a literal tiger, but the part of our brain that processes fear, the amygdala, it lights up in a very similar way.
Yeah.
It's a primal response. And that fear, it often drives us to, conform, to stick with what feels safe and familiar.
Which makes me think of those famous Solomon Asch conformity experiments, right?
Yes.
Where people would rather give the wrong answer than disagree with the group. It's like we're programmed to value belonging over being right.
Exactly. And this brings us to another crucial point that Nietzsche made. He said, insanity in individuals is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule.
Wow. That's a pretty bold. So how do we avoid becoming part of that collective insanity, How do we resist that pull of the herd? How do we start thinking for ourselves, especially today, when it feels like social media and all those algorithms are just constantly reinforcing that herd mentality?
That's a great question. And it's one that we're going to explore in much more depth. But before we get there, let's go back to this idea of the lone wolf versus the herd. Because Nietzsche had some really fascinating insights into how free thinkers, those lone wolves, can not only survive, but actually thrive in a world that often fears them.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do we embrace being the lone wolf without, getting totally lost in the wilderness?
Yeah.
So how does Nietzsche help us, understand these lone wolves, these free thinkers? Does he see them as heroes or villains or, I don't know, maybe something else entirely?
It's interesting. Nietzsche, he really recognized that free thinkers, they often face this real dilemma. They're either seen as like these brilliant geniuses, way ahead of their time. Or, the opposite. They're dismissed as like crazy,
right?
Totally out of touch with reality.
So it's like society can't quite decide whether to put them on a pedestal or lock them away.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating, I think, is that this perception, it often changes over time.
Oh, really?
Ideas that were once considered like totally radical, dangerous even, can become mainstream later on once, people sort of catch up.
It's like how Galileo was condemned for saying, the earth revolves around the sun.
Right.
But now, we teach that to kids in elementary school.
That's a perfect example. And, Nietzsche himself, he experienced this shift in perception. During his lifetime, he was largely ignored. Even ridiculed for his ideas.
Oh, really?
But now, he's considered one of the most important thinkers of the modern era.
Yeah.
And, the video we're deep diving into today, it highlights some really great examples of this same phenomenon happening right now with figures, that we all know.
Like Elon Musk.
Right.
He's either, hailed as this visionary genius or he's condemned as this reckless billionaire. It all depends on who you ask.
Exactly. And then you've got someone like Greta Thunberg, who's been both celebrated for, her climate activism and criticized for her approach.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that being a free thinker often means walking this really tightrope between, admiration and rejection.
It takes real courage to stand by your convictions, even when the whole world is telling you you're wrong, especially when you risk, being labeled as that crazy lone wolf.
Absolutely. But remember, the herd's rejection, it doesn't necessarily mean that an idea is wrong. Right. It often just means that it's ahead of its time. Think of it like this. The lone wolf, they might be the first to sense danger or to discover a new path, even if the rest of the pack, isn't quite ready to follow.
So how do we navigate this tricky terrain? Did Nietzsche offer any advice, for those of us who want to think for ourselves, but don't want to end up, I don't know, completely isolated?
He did. Thankfully, it's not, all doom and gloom.
Okay.
Nietzsche actually provides a sort of a survival guide for free thinkers.
Okay.
He outlines some principles, I guess, to help us, embrace those challenges and rewards of independent thought.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for Nietzsche's wisdom. What's the first rule of Free Thinking Club?
Well, one of his most important concepts is the Übermensch.
Übermensch.
Yeah, it's often translated as, Overman or Superman.
Okay.
Which, might make you think of capes and superpowers.
No, that would be a cool deep dive. But I have a feeling Nietzsche had something a little deeper in mind.
You're right. It's not about, literal superpowers. The Übermensch is more about a kind of a self-transcendence, I guess. It's about becoming the author of your own life, defining your own values instead of just blindly accepting the ones that society hands you.
So it's like Nietzsche is saying, hey, you're not just a sheep in the herd.
Right.
You have the power to create your own path, to become something more than what others expect you to be.
Exactly. He famously said, "No one can build you the bridge on which you must cross the river of life. No one but you." It's a powerful call to take ownership of your beliefs, your actions, even if it means standing apart from the crowd.
That's inspiring, but also a bit intimidating. It's like, who am I to create my own value? What if I get it wrong?
That's where another one of Nietzsche's concepts comes in. Eternal recurrence. It's a thought experiment, really, a way of testing your choices, your commitments.
Okay, this sounds intense. What is eternal recurrence exactly?
Imagine living your life exactly as it is, over and over again for eternity.
Oh.
Every joy, every sorrow, every triumph, every failure.
Yeah.
Repeating endlessly. Would you embrace that, or would that thought fill you with, dread.
That's a tough one. I guess it really depends on how I'm living right now, whether I'm making choices that feel, true to myself.
Exactly. Eternal recurrence, it's not about actually, reliving your life.
Right.
It's about living with intention.
Okay.
Making choices that you can stand by, even if you had to face them, for all eternity.
So it's less about repeating the past and more about living in the present in a way that you wouldn't regret no matter how many times you had to do it all over again. You
got it. It's about taking responsibility for your life and finding meaning in the journey.
Yeah.
Even with all its, imperfections.
That's a really profound idea. But Nietzsche wasn't all about like stoic acceptance, right? He was also about embracing the wildness of life, the chaos, the uncertainty.
Absolutely. Remember his famous line, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star."
That's one of my favorites. So it's not just about, creating our own values. It's about embracing the messiness of life, the challenges, the constant, state of flux. It's about leaning into the unknown instead of trying to control everything.
Precisely. Mm-hmm. Free thinkers, they don't shy away from chaos. They find beauty in it, opportunity even. They understand that growth and creativity, it often emerges from those moments of uncertainty,
Disruption.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of being. It's about embracing the journey, the ups and downs, the constant evolution, which brings us back to the very essence of free thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's about constantly learning, growing, adapting. But let's be honest, it's not always easy to be that lone wolf. It's definitely not. There will be moments of doubt, of loneliness, of feeling like you're swimming upstream. But Nietzsche, he reminds us that the path of the free thinker, it's rarely the path of least, and that's precisely what makes it so rewarding.
So how did Nietzsche himself, navigate this challenging path? I mean, he was pretty radical for his time. What can we learn from his experience? And it's almost ironic, isn't it, that someone who championed individuality like Nietzsche spent so much of his life, feeling isolated. Can you tell us a bit more about his personal journey and what we can learn from it?
Yeah, Nietzsche's life, it really is, it's a fascinating example of the free thinker's journey. He was largely ignored during his lifetime.
Yeah.
And his ideas, they were considered, way too radical, too dangerous even. Like he was just too far ahead of his time, for people to really grasp what he was saying. Exactly. But his work, it eventually had found its audience. Yeah. And today, he's considered one of the most influential philosophers of the modern era. His writings on individuality, morality, the meaning of existence, they continue to resonate with people all over the world.
So even though he faced rejection, isolation, his ideas, they ultimately triumphed. That's pretty inspiring, for anyone who feels like their voice isn't being heard.
It really is. And it speaks to the enduring power of free thought, even when it's, suppressed, even when it's misunderstood, it has a way of bubbling up to the surface.
Yeah.
Challenging the status quo, sparking change.
Like a seed that eventually breaks through the concrete, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And Nietzsche's story, it reminds us that, the herd, they might win the battles of everyday life.
Right.
But it's the free thinkers who ultimately win the wars of progress. They're the ones planting those seeds, daring to imagine a different world, a better world.
So what can we do as individuals to foster the spirit of free inquiry? How do we resist the pull of the herd? How do we forge our own paths, even if it feels scary?
It starts with something really simple. Questioning everything. Don't just accept things at face value. Dig deeper. Challenge those assumptions.
Yeah.
And be willing to change your mind. When you're presented with new evidence.
So it's about embracing that childlike curiosity, that sense of wonder about the world, like remembering what it felt like to ask why about everything.
Exactly. And it's also about cultivating, a healthy skepticism. Don't be afraid to question authority, to challenge the status quo, even if it makes people, a little uncomfortable.
But it's not about being contrary, just for the sake of it. It's about seeking truth, even if it's uncomfortable or challenges our preconceived notions.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's about seeking truth and being willing to stand alone, to be the lone wolf, even when it feels scary. Sometimes the most important truths are the ones that nobody else wants to hear.
It's like choosing the path less traveled, even if it means, facing challenges, uncertainty. It sounds like Nietzsche's reminding us that real growth comes from those moments of discomfort, of question, of being willing to stand apart from the crowd.
He is, and those truths, they often come at a price. There might be rejection, ridicule, even ostracism. But remember, the price of conformity, it's far greater. It's the price of silencing your own voice, of betraying your own potential.
It's a powerful choice, isn't it? Between fitting in and standing out, between comfort and growth, between silence and truth.
And that choice, as Nietzsche reminds us, it's ultimately ours to make. We can choose to be, swept along by the herd, or we can choose to forge our own path, to embrace the chaos and to give birth to our own dancing star.
That's a beautiful thought. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nietzsche and the challenges of free thinking, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I hope they'll remember that even in a world that often fears free thinking, they still have the power to choose, to think, to create.
Right.
And that power, my friends, is what makes life truly worth living.
So to all of you listening, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep embracing the beautiful chaos of free thought. The world, it needs your unique perspective, your willingness to challenge the norm, and your courage to create something new.
Because in the words of Nietzsche, in the struggle between conformity and individuality, there is no greater act of courage than the pursuit of your own truth.
What a perfect note to end on. So as you go out into the world today, ask yourself, what is your truth? And how will you dare to live it? This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining.